to my last topic, which, I feel like at our last meeting, we talked about the next steps with the educational equity policy. And I feel like we had a lot of conversation and it felt like it lacked clarity because there wasn't a motion to say this is where the board stands on next steps. I'm not sure if any conversations have been held since then, and if not, and if so, it would be really helpful to understand what the status is.
Yeah, it's planned to be a first reading on the 25th, along with the other policies as mentioned.
So you have had a meeting with another board director?
Yes.
Okay.
I have, per our current injunction, I get to pick one board member, and I've only met with one board member to discuss that.
Yeah, and I think the lack of clarity there is you can meet with multiple board members. You just have to notify the meeting. You just notice the meeting.
Sure.
It's really not
Understood.
super secretive or anything.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we will have some revisions coming forward at the next board meeting.
Yes, ma'am. Director Winder.
So I just want to, again, echo what Director Meek was concerned about. This board didn't take action to designate two board directors to go and make revisions to a policy. And so I'm a little uncomfortable with the process. And I'm not, and it's certainly not to say anything about you or Director Hansen taking on that task, but it feels like we didn't really go through proper procedure. And if there's lack of clarity about whether at one time we talked about doing it in a work session, at one time we talked about, that Director Peterson, you kind of took the lead to approach Director Hansen. So I was unclear too, but ultimately I'm uncomfortable with us bringing a first reading of a revised policy that's very charged when we didn't direct either one of you to do that. And so I'm just questioning that process. So I just need to put that out there, and you can respond if you'd like, but I would just say I'm very uncomfortable with how that evolved.
I do not have any committee updates, but I would like to just respond to Director Meek and Director Ray's concerns. I also am uncomfortable with the way that this has unfolded. When Director Peterson approached me, I was under the impression that we would be following the resolution that was passed by this board. Even though I disagreed with it, adamantly disagreed with it, it was passed. And per our board policy, I was going to support that policy and wait for feedback from our superintendent. It was only in our last meeting that I learned that the superintendent would not be providing any feedback to the board. I was under the impression that Director Peterson and I would be sifting through mounds of feedback from our community, from our superintendent, pursuant to the resolution that we passed as a board. It has definitely unfolded in a different way, and I am also uncomfortable with it. And I'm not sure, as I'm sitting here, exactly what the best path forward is, but it is certainly not what I thought I was agreeing to. And I'm also, if I'm being very honest, because I wanted to make sure I was clear on exactly what if I had agreed to what I thought I had agreed to, and I went back and watched our two previous meetings, 10 out of 10 do not recommend that. Even as I'm sitting here, even as I was walking in the door tonight, I was in a different frame of mind than I have been the last several months. It is an incredibly polarizing conversation. I can feel my own emotions just bubbling, even sitting here tonight after having watched those and reliving all of those experiences. I want to, as a group, come up with the best path forward, and I have to be honest, as I'm sitting here right now, I don't know what that is. I personally do not think any revisions need to be made to the policy. There has been no feedback from our superintendent. I also know that as a board of 7, we can absolutely workshop a policy, and it's really an easy process. I also, at the same time, I want to get through the work, and I want to be able to focus forward rather than continue to revisit things. So not anything planned that I was going to share tonight. So that was not a very, that wasn't the best thing I've ever said sitting here, but that's my real feelings.
Director Ray?
If I could just respond, you were asking for a path forward, and I think when there's lack of clarity and discomfort, the path forward is the stop, quite honestly. And certainly when you look at that equity policy that was actually composed and created by experts in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion, tinkering with it as non-experts, I think is kind of an insult to the work that those people did. And minimally, I think those people that originated that work ought to have been consulted. I just think that we're opening up a can of worms, and you've already said, Director Peterson, that the next meeting looks pretty packed. And I think for us to bring this issue in with a revised, some recommendations of a revision makes no sense. As Director Hansen said, the resolution did not say directors go and find revisions and bring them back. It was really placed on the superintendent. It was directed of the superintendent. And so I just feel like that we're trying to force something that we shouldn't. We should wait until staff has had a chance to really help us understand implementation of that policy. And then we can begin talking about if we need to engage in some kind of a revision process or not. But I just think we are opening up a can of worms for our community. If we're confused about it and we're not in agreement, you can only imagine what our community will feel like on that night when they come out for public comment. So when there's lack of clarity, stop, pause, and let's not move forward would be my recommendation at this point as one board director.
Thank you, Director Ray. Director Williams.
So I guess my only response to that would be, I think that any one of the 7 of us at any time can bring a policy suggestion forward at any time. Director Ray, you brought one forward not too terribly long ago about a 2/3 majority vote. And so I'm just suggesting that at any time, any of us can bring something forward. It does not have to be directed by the board in order to come with revisions or changes to policies. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. And I certainly agree, Director Williams, but I think this is different. This is not a new policy. This is a policy that's being revised and publicly scrutinized, and there have been some public statements about directors doing revisions and coming back with recommendations. So I think we've set this policy up differently than just a policy that we're bringing forward to add some revisions. I mean, you're absolutely correct. A board director ought to have that ability to do that. But I feel like this is one of those issues we talked about tonight that will cause polarization, that will cause our staff a lot of angst because they're having to do damage control because we aren't in agreement with how to move forward. So I would just plead that we take our time, that we pause, and see what staff have to offer with the implementation plan.